The entire history of Caesar in Gaul, 58 to 50 BCE, begins in a land divided. Gaul was a tapestry of tribes, each with its own customs, alliances, and rivalries. From the rolling plains of the Helvetii to the fortified hill towns of the Arverni, Gaul was both rich and perilous, a prize for the ambitious Roman general Julius Caesar. It was 58 BCE, and Rome's northern provinces faced constant threats from migrating tribes and restless neighbors. Into this volatile world stepped Caesar, a man whose ambition matched his military genius. Over the next 8 years, he would reshape Gaul, crush its most formidable leaders, and lay the foundation for his rise to absolute power in Rome. This is the entire story of Caesar in Gaul, 58 to 50 BCE, the campaigns, the battles, the alliances, and the legendary siege of Alesia. In the year 58 BCE, Gaul was a land of diversity, conflict, and opportunity. It was far from a single country. Instead, it was a patchwork of more than 60 tribes, each with its own customs, rulers, and territories. Some tribes were large and powerful, like the Helvetii in the east, who occupied the area of modern-day Switzerland, or the Arverni in central Gaul. Others were smaller but fierce, such as the Nervii in the north, or the Veneti along the Atlantic coast, a seafaring people who controlled important trade routes. The landscape itself shaped these tribes. Rolling hills, dense forests, wide rivers, and strategic hill forts made warfare and communication challenging. Rome's influence in Gaul was limited. The southern regions, near the Mediterranean, had long been under Roman control, part of the province of Narbonensis, and here Roman law, administration, and trade were established. But beyond this, the north and west of Gaul were free from direct Roman control. These tribes often fought each other for land and resources. Alliances shifted frequently, and a tribe considered a friend one year might become an enemy the next. It was a land of opportunity and danger, one where a bold and clever general could rise to fame, and one where a miscalculation could mean disaster. Into this complex landscape came Julius Caesar, recently appointed proconsul of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. He was young, ambitious, and politically vulnerable in Rome. Caesar needed military victories to strengthen his position in the Senate and protect his career from rivals. His experience as a politician and general showed him that success in Gaul could bring both wealth and soldiers loyal to him personally, resources that were crucial in the unstable politics of the Roman Republic. Strategically, Gaul offered more than just prestige. It was rich in fertile land, minerals, and manpower. Many Gallic tribes maintained large numbers of warriors, some of whom could be recruited into the Roman army as auxiliaries. Caesar also understood the political stakes. The tribes of Gaul had long operated independently, but they were not united. Their lack of central authority made them vulnerable, yet it also meant that any single tribe could resist Rome if its leaders were clever and organized. Caesar's position in Gaul was complicated. He commanded only 2 legions at the start of his tenure, around 10,000 soldiers, a relatively small force compared to the numbers of some of the tribes. He could not rely solely on numbers. He would need discipline, intelligence, and the element of surprise. He had to assess the loyalty of Roman allies and prepare for tribes that might rebel if they sensed weakness. Every decision carried risks. A failed campaign could end his career or even threaten his life. The tribes of Gaul were not passive observers. They were aware of Rome's expansion, and some feared the consequences of Caesar's arrival. Others saw opportunities in the chaos. Tribal politics were complex. Many tribes had long-standing rivalries with their neighbors. In some cases, one tribe might invite a foreign army to settle a score, not realizing the long-term consequences. This mix of fear, ambition, and uncertainty created a volatile environment. Among these tribes, the Helvetii were beginning to move. In the east, they faced pressure from Germanic tribes migrating across the Rhine. The Helvetii decided to abandon their homeland and seek better lands further west, planning a massive migration that included not just warriors but families, livestock, and possessions. Their plan was bold and ambitious: to travel hundreds of miles across Gaul, displacing other tribes along the way. This migration was not simply a movement of people, it was a statement, a demonstration of strength, and a challenge to Rome. The Helvetii's migration would become the first major challenge for Caesar, but it also revealed the Roman general's approach to leadership and warfare. He combined strategic thinking with careful preparation. He relied on intelligence, sending scouts to observe enemy movements and gather information about the terrain. He used diplomacy to form temporary alliances with certain tribes while preparing for confrontation with others. Caesar understood that the people of Gaul could be persuaded, intimidated, or defeated, and he knew how to decide which approach to use. The broader political situation in Rome also influenced Caesar's actions. The Senate was divided, and powerful figures like Pompey and Crassus were both rivals and potential allies. Caesar needed victories in Gaul not just to secure the provinces, but to build personal prestige. Military success would bring wealth from spoils and tribute, loyal troops who owed their careers to him, and the political leverage to negotiate in Rome. A single failure could ruin him. A single decisive victory could elevate him to near-mythical status. Geography played a crucial role in Gaul's politics and warfare. Rivers such as the Rhine and the Loire were natural boundaries that both protected and limited movement. Dense forests could hide armies, but also slow them down. Hill forts, or oppida, served as defensive strongholds for the tribes, making direct assault costly. Control of roads and river crossings was critical for moving troops and supplies. Caesar understood that the terrain itself could be an ally or an enemy, and he studied it carefully, planning his campaigns around these natural features. Trade and economy were also central to Gaul's importance. The tribes engaged in agriculture, raising cattle, sheep, and grain, while coastal tribes like the Veneti traded goods by sea. Metals such as iron and tin were valuable commodities. Rome's expansion into Gaul would give access to these resources, making the conquest not just a military campaign, but an economic opportunity. Caesar's attention to these details, supply lines, resource acquisition, and control of trade routes, was part of what made him a remarkable general. Culturally, the Gauls were diverse. While sharing certain Celtic traditions, language, and religious practices, the tribes were distinct in customs, governance, and military organization. Leadership often came from noble families or warrior elites, and loyalty was personal rather than institutional. This meant Caesar could negotiate with some tribes while defeating others, but it also meant that alliances were fragile and could change quickly. Every campaign required not only force, but careful attention to the political landscape. Caesar's first months in Gaul were thus a period of observation and preparation. He had to learn the terrain, understand the tribes, and assess the loyalty of Roman allies. Intelligence was vital. He sent envoys to gather information, employed scouts to monitor movements, and even engaged in minor skirmishes to test enemy tactics. At the same time, he maintained strict discipline within his legions, ensuring that his soldiers were prepared for the challenges ahead. The stage was set for confrontation. The Helvetii were moving westward. Ariovistus and the Germans were consolidating power in the east, and northern tribes were watching, weighing whether to resist or submit. Caesar's position was delicate but promising. A single decisive campaign could secure his reputation, establish Roman authority in Gaul, and provide the wealth and manpower he needed for the future. By the spring of 58 BCE, Caesar was ready to act. His strategy combined speed, intelligence, and decisive action. He would confront the Helvetii before they could complete their migration, securing territory and demonstrating Rome's power. At the same time, he was aware that more challenges were coming. Ariovistus was a looming threat, and the northern tribes of Gaul were not yet fully subdued. The success or failure of these early campaigns would define his career and the future of Gaul itself. In the year 58 BCE, the tribes of Gaul were on the move. Among them, the Helvetii, an eastern Gallic tribe living in the area of modern Switzerland, faced pressure from Germanic neighbors to the east. They decided to leave their ancestral lands and search for new, more fertile territories in the west. This migration was not a simple journey of a few thousand people. It involved tens of thousands: men, women, children, the elderly, and their livestock, moving as a single, coordinated force across hundreds of miles of often hostile territory. Their goal was ambitious: to settle near the Loire River, displacing or absorbing smaller tribes along the way. From Rome's perspective, the Helvetii migration was a threat. Caesar, newly appointed proconsul of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum, knew that if the Helvetii succeeded, they could destabilize Roman allied tribes and challenge Roman influence in the region. For Caesar, this was both a danger and an opportunity. Military success could strengthen his political position back in Rome, win loyalty from his soldiers, and secure wealth through plunder and tribute. The stakes were clear. A decisive victory here would set the tone for the campaigns to come. Caesar began his campaign by gathering intelligence. He sent scouts to track the Helvetii's movement, map their routes, and gather information about their numbers, armament, and organization. The Helvetii were not a simple mob. They were a disciplined, migrating force, organized into tribal units, each led by its own chieftain. Their army of warriors was substantial, possibly numbering between 20,000 to 30,000, supported by tens of thousands of non-combatants. They moved with carts carrying families and supplies, making them slow and vulnerable to attacks at the right moment. Caesar's forces, by contrast, were small but highly disciplined. He commanded 2 legions, roughly 10,000 men, backed by auxiliary cavalry. The Roman soldiers were trained to fight in tight formations, maintain supply lines, and construct fortifications quickly. Caesar relied on their discipline, engineering skills, and his own tactical brilliance to offset the Helvetii's numerical advantage. He understood that speed, positioning, and timing would be decisive in the coming engagement. The Helvetii initially attempted to move peacefully through Gallic territories, hoping to avoid conflict with Rome and allied tribes. They demanded passage and sought to negotiate with local tribes, but Caesar refused to allow them free passage. Allowing the Helvetii to migrate unchecked would signal weakness, embolden other tribes, and potentially threaten Rome's allies. Instead, Caesar prepared to intercept them, aiming to force a battle under favorable conditions. By late spring, the Helvetii reached Bibracte, a major Gallic oppidum located on a hill in the territory of the Aedui, a Roman ally. Here, Caesar chose to make his stand. The battle that would unfold at Bibracte was a clash not only of armies but of strategies. The Helvetii relied on numbers and tribal cohesion, while Caesar used intelligence, discipline, and the terrain to his advantage. Roman scouts located the main column of the Helvetii, and Caesar positioned his legions on higher ground, controlling key approaches and forcing the Helvetii to engage where he could dictate the fight. When the battle began, the Helvetii attacked in a series of massed formations, attempting to overwhelm the Romans with their size and ferocity. Cavalry skirmishes tested the flanks, and the infantry advanced steadily. Caesar, anticipating their moves, deployed reserves strategically, reinforcing points under pressure and exploiting weaknesses in the Helvetii's lines. Roman discipline proved crucial. Soldiers maintained formation under attack, responded to signals from officers, and used pila, javelins, to disrupt enemy charges. The battle at Bibracte lasted several days, with intense fighting on both sides. The Helvetii were brave and organized, but they were unprepared for the combination of Roman tactics and engineering. Caesar's forces dug trenches, erected fortifications, and used natural terrain to trap and divide the Helvetii. The Romans attacked weak points in the Helvetii columns, preventing them from consolidating their numerical advantage. Slowly, the Helvetii were pushed back, suffering heavy losses and becoming increasingly disorganized. Eventually, Caesar forced the Helvetii to surrender. He imposed terms that required them to return to their homeland. Their migration ended, not through annihilation, but through careful application of Roman strategy. This victory demonstrated Caesar's ability to manage both the battlefield and the broader political landscape. He crushed a threat while preserving his reputation as a capable but measured commander. While the Helvetii had been defeated, a larger threat loomed. Ariovistus, a Germanic king who had settled west of the Rhine, posed a new danger. Unlike the Helvetii, Ariovistus was a seasoned commander with experience fighting Romans and Gallic tribes. He had been invited into Gaul by some tribes seeking protection against rival groups. But his ambitions were clear. He intended to establish a Germanic kingdom within Gallic territories, threatening Rome's allies and challenging Caesar's authority. Caesar could not ignore Ariovistus. His presence jeopardized Roman influence and could destabilize regions that had recently submitted. In response, Caesar marched east, determined to confront the Germanic king. By the summer of 58 BCE, the Roman and Germanic armies faced each other near the Vosges Mountains, a region of hills, rivers, and narrow passes that offered both advantages and challenges. Ariovistus had fortified his positions, and his warriors were experienced and disciplined, making him a formidable opponent. The Battle of Vosges was a test of strategy, tactics, and leadership. Caesar did not rely solely on brute force. He constructed field fortifications, placed scouts to monitor enemy movements, and positioned his legions to exploit weaknesses in Ariovistus's lines. He also used psychological tactics, presenting his forces in a way that made them appear stronger and more coordinated than they might have seemed, luring Ariovistus into risky attacks. When the battle began, Ariovistus attempted to use his Germanic warriors' mobility and aggression to overwhelm the Romans. Yet Caesar's planning prevailed. Roman formations held steady under assault, reserves reinforced points under pressure, and cavalry disrupted enemy flanks. The combination of disciplined infantry, strategic fortifications, and clever maneuvering turned the tide in favor of Rome. Ariovistus was forced to retreat across the Rhine, abandoning his ambitions in Gaul and leaving his Gallic allies to submit to Roman authority. The campaigns against the Helvetii and Ariovistus revealed several key aspects of Caesar's leadership. He combined intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and disciplined execution. He understood that victory required more than defeating an army. It required controlling the political environment, shaping alliances, and demonstrating authority. Tribes had to see that resistance was futile, but submission could offer protection. Every decision was measured, every action calculated. These victories also reshaped Gaul's political landscape. The Helvetii were returned to their lands, a reminder of Roman dominance. Germanic threats were pushed beyond the Rhine, securing the eastern frontier. The Roman allies, such as the Aedui, saw that Caesar could protect them while punishing those who threatened stability. At the same time, the tribes that had not yet submitted observed closely, weighing whether to resist or align with Rome. By the end of 58 BCE, Caesar had achieved more than simple battlefield victories. He had secured the eastern territories, strengthened Roman influence, and demonstrated his military and political skill. He had established a model for dealing with Gaul, a combination of careful planning, decisive action, and strategic diplomacy. He had set a standard for the campaigns that would follow in the north, west, and beyond. The Helvetii and Ariovistus campaigns also highlighted the challenges of leadership in a complex, divided region. Tribes were numerous and diverse, with their own traditions and loyalties. Geography shaped every decision. Rivers, forests, hills, and oppida, fortified towns, could protect or trap armies. Logistics were crucial, from supplying legions to managing the movements of migrating peoples. Caesar had to integrate all these elements to succeed, a feat that required both intelligence and adaptability. By defeating the Helvetii and pushing Ariovistus back, Caesar sent a clear message. Rome would not tolerate threats to its influence, and Caesar was a commander capable of enforcing that authority. These early campaigns set the tone for the years to come, establishing patterns of conquest, alliance, and suppression that would define the entire history of Caesar in Gaul. Fast forward to 57 BCE, and Gaul, though subdued in parts, was far from fully under Roman control. Caesar's victory over the Helvetii and his triumph against Ariovistus had secured the eastern territories and demonstrated Roman strength, but the north remained a volatile frontier. Here lived the Belgi, a coalition of tribes occupying the vast plains of modern Belgium and northern France. Fierce, proud, and fiercely independent, the Belgi were unlike the Gallic tribes Caesar had faced before. They were known for their courage in battle, discipline in organization, and suspicion of outsiders, qualities that would make them formidable adversaries. The Belgi were not a single people, but a confederation of tribes. Among them were the Nervii, who were particularly feared for their martial skill, the Eburones, the Remi, the Viromandui, and several others. Each tribe had its own chieftain, warriors, and councils, but the Belgi could unite when threatened. Their strength lay in numbers and cohesion, as well as their knowledge of the dense forests, rivers, and marshes that dominated the northern territories. These natural barriers gave them strategic advantages, allowing them to ambush invaders and retreat when necessary. Caesar, aware of the growing coalition, understood that he could not afford to let the Belgi unite fully against him. Timing would be critical. His strategy relied on speed, surprise, and the disciplined use of Roman legions. He aimed to strike swiftly before the tribes could consolidate their forces. Failure to do so would allow the Belgi to amass a larger army, one capable of overwhelming Roman forces and potentially igniting a widespread rebellion across northern Gaul. The Roman approach to the campaign was methodical. Caesar sent emissaries to some tribes, seeking alliances or neutrality, while simultaneously mobilizing his legions. He used intelligence from scouts and allied tribes to monitor troop movements and plan supply lines. The Romans understood that northern Gaul was different from the east. The plains were open but interspersed with dense forests and rivers, and the Belgi were skilled in guerrilla tactics. To succeed, Caesar would have to adapt his strategies, relying on fortifications, disciplined formations, and decisive action at critical points. As Caesar advanced into Belgic territory, the Belgi formed a defensive coalition determined to resist Roman incursion. The Nervii, in particular, were prepared for battle, choosing to fight in open fields where their bravery and cohesion could challenge the Romans. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test Caesar's ability to control not just the battlefield, but the larger political situation. A victory would expand Roman influence. A defeat could spark widespread rebellion and endanger his position in Gaul and Rome alike. The pivotal confrontation occurred near the territory of the Nervii, a tribe renowned for their ferocity. Caesar's legions, though fewer in number than the combined Belgic forces, were highly trained, disciplined, and organized into flexible formations. He employed tactical innovation, using the flexibility of the Roman manipular system to adapt to the Belgi's aggressive assaults. Soldiers could advance, hold ground, or retreat in a controlled manner, allowing Caesar to respond to sudden threats or exploit weaknesses in enemy lines. The battle unfolded in intense phases. The Belgi attacked in massed columns, attempting to break the Roman center quickly. Cavalry skirmishes tested the flanks, and the Nervii sought to exploit gaps in the Roman formation. Caesar, however, anticipated these moves. He reinforced weak points with reserve troops, used the terrain to his advantage, and maintained communication with all units. The Romans built temporary fortifications during the engagement, a tactic that disrupted the Belgi's momentum and provided safe positions from which to counterattack. One of the most critical moments came when the Nervii launched a concentrated assault on the Roman center. The Belgi pushed hard, forcing Caesar's troops back and threatening to encircle the legions. Caesar himself moved among the soldiers, coordinating responses, encouraging the troops, and personally overseeing the deployment of reserves. The discipline and training of the legions proved decisive. Roman soldiers held their ground, used pila, javelins, to disrupt the advancing enemy, and counterattacked with precision. After hours of fierce fighting, the Belgi began to falter. The Nervii, despite their courage and skill, were overwhelmed by the combination of Roman tactics, discipline, and strategic positioning. Caesar's forces exploited the disarray, pressing the attack and turning the tide decisively. By the end of the day, the Belgi suffered heavy losses. Caesar, however, was not merely interested in annihilation. He aimed to secure Roman authority and demonstrate the consequences of resistance. The surviving tribes were compelled to submit, pay tribute, and acknowledge Rome's supremacy in the region. The Belgic campaign had multiple effects. Militarily, it secured northern Gaul, bringing strategic plains and river crossings under Roman control. Politically, it reinforced Caesar's reputation as a commander who could act decisively against large and organized coalitions. Economically, the submission of the Belgi allowed the Romans to access resources, recruit auxiliary troops, and establish administrative structures that would support further campaigns. Caesar's approach to governance during the campaign was as important as his battlefield tactics. He balanced punishment with diplomacy, rewarding tribes that submitted while exacting harsh consequences from those that resisted. This approach ensured loyalty, minimized future rebellions, and created a network of allied tribes that would provide intelligence, support, and manpower in subsequent campaigns. The psychological impact of the campaign on Gaul was significant. The defeat of the Belgi sent a clear message. Rome was not merely a distant power, but a force capable of decisive action, able to crush even the most determined coalitions. The northern tribes, observing the outcome, were forced to reconsider their positions. Some sought alliance with Caesar, others prepared for resistance, knowing that the next confrontation could be even more dangerous. The campaign also revealed Caesar's ability to integrate logistics, intelligence, and tactics in complex operations. Northern Gaul's terrain, rivers, forests, and open plains, posed challenges for both attack and supply. Caesar ensured that his legions were well-provisioned, coordinated movements across difficult terrain, and used scouts to anticipate enemy strategies. He combined conventional battlefield engagements with fortifications and strategic positioning, demonstrating a level of planning and execution that would define his later campaigns. Beyond the battlefield, the campaign had long-term consequences. The submission of the Belgi extended Roman influence across northern Gaul, connecting the eastern provinces with the western plains. It provided Caesar with a secure northern frontier, allowing him to focus on other regions, including western maritime tribes and the Germanic tribes across the Rhine. The campaign also solidified the role of Roman diplomacy. Caesar's ability to negotiate, intimidate, and reward loyalty became as important as his ability to win battles. The defeat of the Nervii and other Belgic tribes also highlighted the cultural and social differences between Gaul and Rome. The Belgi were fierce warriors, deeply attached to their tribal identities and traditional ways of life. Rome, by contrast, brought centralized command, discipline, and organization. The encounter between these cultures was not just military, but symbolic. The old world of independent tribes confronted the rising power of an empire, guided by a commander who understood how to combine force, strategy, and politics. By the end of 57 BCE, northern Gaul was under Roman control. Caesar had achieved a remarkable victory over a coalition of powerful tribes, demonstrating his ability to act decisively against a numerically superior enemy. The campaign provided security for Roman allies, access to resources, and a network of subordinate tribes whose loyalty could be leveraged in future operations. It also set a precedent for how Caesar would deal with resistance in the years to come: swift, decisive, and strategic, with a combination of military force and political calculation. The Belgic campaign marked a turning point in the Roman conquest of Gaul. It showed that even the most formidable tribes could be subdued by a combination of intelligence, strategy, and disciplined execution. Caesar's victory secured not only territory, but also his reputation as a commander capable of leading complex operations across vast and varied landscapes. His success in northern Gaul paved the way for campaigns in western Gaul against maritime tribes, and eventually against the Germanic forces that threatened Roman interests. In many ways, the Belgic campaign was a blueprint for Caesar's methods in Gaul: identify threats early, strike decisively, integrate diplomacy and force, and maintain control over both the battlefield and the political environment. The lessons learned here would inform his actions in Brittany, the Rhine expeditions, and even his later encounters with the united tribes under Vercingetorix. By the close of 57 BCE, Caesar's influence extended across the northern plains. The Belgi had been defeated, their coalition broken, and Rome's presence in Gaul solidified. The campaign demonstrated the effectiveness of Roman military discipline, engineering, and strategy against a determined and well-organized enemy. It also highlighted Caesar's ability to manage complex operations involving logistics, diplomacy, and battlefield tactics simultaneously, a combination that would define his campaigns for the next several years. The northern tribes of Gaul had learned a harsh lesson. Rome, under Caesar, was a power that could not be ignored. Resistance was possible, but it came at a tremendous cost. Alliances had to be reconsidered, strategies revised, and loyalties tested. The Belgic campaign was not only a military success, but also a psychological victory, reinforcing the idea that the rise of Rome in Gaul was unstoppable and that Caesar was a commander whose genius extended far beyond the battlefield. By 56 BCE, the Roman conquest of Gaul had advanced from the east and the north, but the western regions, particularly the coasts of Brittany, remained a challenge. Here lived the Veneti, a seafaring Gallic tribe renowned for their ships, maritime skills, and control over critical Atlantic trade routes. They were not just another tribe. They were a formidable naval power whose influence extended across the coastlines and into the English Channel. For Caesar, bringing these tribes under Roman control was both a strategic necessity and a test of adaptability. Unlike previous campaigns on land, success here would require mastery of naval warfare as well as diplomacy and logistics. The Veneti controlled a network of ports and harbors along the rugged coastline. Their wealth came from maritime trade, tin from the British Isles, fish and salt, and other commodities that were essential for regional economies. Their ships, sturdy and fast, were built for both trade and war. Unlike Gallic warriors of the interior, the Veneti could strike from the sea, move quickly along the coast, and retreat to fortified harbors that were difficult to assault. They understood that their naval superiority gave them leverage over the Romans, who were primarily a land-based military power. Tensions escalated when Caesar demanded hostages from the Veneti to guarantee loyalty, a standard Roman practice designed to ensure cooperation. The Veneti refused, interpreting the demand as an affront to their sovereignty. They began preparing for resistance, warning neighboring tribes that Rome intended to dominate the western coasts. Their defiance was both political and strategic. Surrender would mean the loss of autonomy and control over trade routes, while resistance carried the risk of Roman reprisal. Caesar, determined to secure Western Gaul, responded with preparation and innovation. Unlike previous campaigns, where terrain and enemy numbers dictated tactics, the challenge here required naval adaptation. Caesar commissioned a fleet, constructing ships suitable for the shallow waters and harbors of Brittany. He equipped them with boarding devices, ropes, and hooks designed to immobilize the Veneti vessels, countering the enemy's maritime advantages. Engineers worked tirelessly, adapting Roman ingenuity to a theater of war that was unfamiliar but critical. As the campaign began, the Romans moved strategically along the coast, seizing key positions and cutting off supply routes. The Veneti retreated to fortified harbors, using the natural geography to their advantage. Caesar could not rely solely on traditional land engagements. He needed to draw the Veneti into a confrontation where Roman tactics could prevail. Intelligence played a critical role. Scouts observed ship movements, mapped harbor exits, and reported the composition and readiness of the Veneti fleet. Caesar's understanding of logistics and timing would determine whether the campaign succeeded or failed. The decisive engagement occurred at the Battle of the Veneti, a series of naval encounters near the Atlantic coast. The Veneti, confident in their ships and seamanship, attempted to maneuver around the Roman fleet, using wind, currents, and knowledge of the coastline. But Caesar had prepared cleverly. He instructed Roman soldiers to use long hooks and ropes to latch onto the Veneti ships' rudders, rendering them immobile. Once the ships were trapped, Roman soldiers boarded and engaged in close-quarters combat, neutralizing the advantage of the Veneti sailors. The Romans attacked with discipline and coordination. The Veneti fought bravely, but their reliance on mobility and speed was nullified by Caesar's innovations. The battle, while largely a maritime engagement, also involved strategic placement on land, control of supply routes, and the rapid movement of troops. After hours of fierce fighting, the Veneti fleet was destroyed or captured, and the tribe's leadership was forced to surrender. Caesar executed the chief leaders as an example, demonstrating the consequences of defying Rome, while integrating the remaining population into the Roman system. The campaign against the Veneti had profound strategic consequences. By securing the Atlantic coast, Caesar controlled trade routes, ensured supply lines, and prevented potential alliances between maritime tribes and other Gallic factions. It also demonstrated that Roman power was adaptable. Success in Western Gaul showed that Rome could project force not only across plains and forests, but also across the seas, countering the strengths of specialized enemies with innovation and discipline. Caesar's handling of the Veneti also highlighted the interplay between political authority and military action. While the Romans were ruthless in punishing leadership, they were pragmatic in managing populations. The destruction of the Veneti fleet and the execution of chieftains sent a clear warning to neighboring tribes. Resistance was costly. At the same time, the integration of surviving populations into Roman-controlled territories secured manpower, resources, and stability, preventing prolonged insurgency. The psychological effect of the campaign was significant. Coastal tribes observed that Rome could dominate not only on land but also at sea, undermining the confidence of any potential opponents. The fall of the Veneti signaled that Roman authority extended to regions previously thought unreachable, whether due to geography, specialized skills, or cultural isolation. The message was clear: Rome adapted to challenges, and Caesar's strategic genius could overcome even the most unconventional threats. This campaign also showcased the importance of engineering and innovation in Roman warfare. The Romans were not just soldiers. They were builders, strategists, and problem solvers. Caesar's fleet was designed specifically for the unique challenges of the Atlantic coast, turning potential disadvantages into strengths. The use of hooks to disable enemy ships was a simple but ingenious solution, demonstrating that victory often depended on creativity as much as courage or numbers. Beyond the military aspects, the Veneti campaign strengthened Roman administration in Western Gaul. The submission of coastal tribes allowed Caesar to establish administrative structures, enforce tribute, and create networks of alliances that would facilitate the movement of troops and supplies in future campaigns. Trade could now proceed under Roman oversight, ensuring both economic benefit and political control. The campaign also provided Caesar with wealth, prestige, and a reputation for decisiveness, reinforcing his position both in Gaul and back in Rome. By the end of 56 BCE, the western coast of Gaul was under Roman control. The Veneti had been defeated, surrounding tribes had submitted, and Caesar had proven that Roman power could extend into maritime regions. The campaign demonstrated the integration of land and sea operations, intelligence, logistics, and political strategy, all essential components of Caesar's approach to conquest. It also sent a broader message across Gaul. Rome was flexible, relentless, and capable of defeating specialized enemies who relied on terrain, mobility, or unique skills. The fall of the Veneti also set the stage for future campaigns beyond Gaul. Control of the western coasts facilitated intelligence gathering, access to supplies, and even preparations for the later expeditions across the English Channel. It demonstrated that Caesar's ambition was not limited to Gaul itself, but extended to regions that might support or threaten Roman interests, including Britain and the Germanic lands across the Rhine. Culturally, the campaign had lasting effects. The integration of the Veneti and other maritime tribes into the Roman system introduced Roman administration, taxation, and law to regions that had previously operated independently. Over time, this would contribute to the broader process of Romanization, influencing language, customs, trade, and political structures. Caesar's approach balanced coercion with pragmatism. Leaders who resisted were punished, but the surviving populations were absorbed into the expanding Roman order. The 56 BCE campaign against the Veneti also highlighted a recurring theme in Caesar's conquests: the combination of speed, intelligence, and adaptability. He recognized threats early, prepared solutions tailored to specific challenges, and executed operations with precision. Whether facing tribes in the plains, forests, or along the coast, Caesar demonstrated that flexibility and innovation were as crucial as strength in numbers or battlefield skill. By the close of the year, Western Gaul was firmly under Roman influence. Caesar had not only defeated a specialized maritime threat, but had also solidified Rome's position across multiple regions. The success of the campaign strengthened his reputation as a commander capable of tackling diverse challenges, integrating diplomacy and force, and extending Rome's authority into territories previously considered difficult or unreachable. The campaign against the Veneti marked a turning point in the Roman conquest of Gaul. It demonstrated that the Romans could adapt to any theater of war, from the river valleys of the east to the plains of the north, and now to the rugged coasts of the west. Caesar's combination of tactical ingenuity, logistical planning, and political acumen set a standard for the remaining campaigns that would unfold over the next few years. In essence, the defeat of the Veneti was more than a military victory. It was a demonstration of Roman flexibility, the integration of engineering with strategy, and the imposition of political authority over resistant populations. The campaign secured trade, reinforced alliances, and established a model for future operations against other tribes in Gaul. By the end of 56 BCE, the Veneti and the western coastal tribes had learned a crucial lesson. Resistance to Rome under Caesar was not merely dangerous, it was futile. By the year 55 BCE, Caesar had secured much of eastern, northern, and western Gaul. The Helvetii had been defeated, Ariovistus pushed back across the Rhine, the Belgi subdued, and the Veneti brought under Roman control. Yet, Caesar's ambition and strategic foresight were far from satisfied. While the Gallic tribes had been subdued to varying degrees, he knew that threats remained, both from rebellious Gauls and from the Germanic tribes across the Rhine. Additionally, the mysterious lands across the sea, Britain, offered potential allies to Gaulish tribes and posed a challenge to Roman authority if left unmonitored. Caesar's priority was the eastern frontier. Germanic tribes, particularly those who had witnessed Ariovistus' earlier defeat, were cautious but still a potential threat. In 55 BCE, Caesar undertook the first crossing of the Rhine River, a feat of both engineering and military boldness. The Rhine was a formidable natural barrier, wide and fast-flowing, marking the traditional boundary between Gaul and Germanic territories. Roman soldiers, trained in construction and disciplined in coordination, built a bridge over the river in an astonishing 10 days, demonstrating both the speed and technical skill that would become hallmarks of Caesar's campaigns. Once across, the Roman legions moved into Germanic territory. Caesar's purpose was twofold: to punish tribes that threatened Roman allies and to showcase the reach and power of Rome. The Germanic tribes, though numerous and fierce, were largely scattered. Caesar did not seek prolonged occupation. Instead, he executed a show of force. Roman soldiers marched, displayed their discipline, and engaged in skirmishes where necessary, leaving a lasting impression. By demonstrating Rome's ability to cross the Rhine at will, Caesar effectively deterred future incursions and reinforced the security of the eastern Gallic frontier. After securing the Rhine, Caesar's attention turned to Britain, an island shrouded in mystery for most Romans. Reports had reached Gaul of wealthy and independent tribes across the Channel, some of whom were believed to provide support to rebellious Gallic factions. In 55 BCE, Caesar mounted his first expedition to Britain, primarily a reconnaissance and show-of-force operation rather than a full-scale conquest. He constructed a fleet capable of transporting legions across the treacherous waters of the English Channel, demonstrating Roman adaptability in maritime operations following the successes against the Veneti. Upon landing, Caesar faced the challenges of an unfamiliar land. The British tribes were wary and often retreated rather than engaging in large-scale confrontations. Geography played a critical role. Marshes, rivers, and dense woodlands slowed Roman movements and required careful planning to maintain supply lines. The Romans used their engineering expertise to construct temporary fortifications, bridge rivers, and coordinate troops in hostile terrain. While the first expedition yielded few direct victories, it provided invaluable intelligence on the geography, tribal organization, and defensive strategies of the island, setting the stage for future campaigns. Caesar returned to Gaul in late 55 BCE, having achieved the goals of reconnaissance and intimidation. The British tribes, impressed by the Romans' crossing and organization, were less likely to support rebellious Gallic factions. At the same time, the experience highlighted the logistical challenges of overseas expeditions, including the transport of men, animals, and supplies across unpredictable seas. This lesson would inform Caesar's next expedition to Britain, planned for the following year. In 54 BCE, Caesar launched his second expedition to Britain, this time with a larger force, possibly 2 legions and auxiliary troops, supported by cavalry and a fleet of transport and warships. The objective was clear: gather intelligence, intimidate potential allies of rebellious Gauls, and demonstrate Roman dominance across the Channel. Unlike the previous year, Caesar was better prepared for the terrain, the weather, and the challenges of transporting large numbers of troops by sea. Upon landing, Caesar's legions advanced into the interior, facing resistance from British warriors who, while brave, lacked the organization and discipline of the Roman legions. Skirmishes erupted near fortified settlements, with the Romans using their superior training, coordination, and siege techniques to overcome obstacles. In some cases, the British tribes offered submission or negotiated truces, recognizing the futility of resisting a well-coordinated Roman army. The expedition, though not a conquest in the modern sense, achieved its strategic aims. Intelligence was gathered, the island's tribes were intimidated, and Caesar demonstrated that Roman power could extend even across the seas. The Rhine and Britain expeditions were remarkable not only for their military outcomes, but also for their psychological impact. Germanic tribes across the Rhine were reminded that Rome could project force into their territory with speed and precision. British tribes, previously unknown to Rome, were now aware of Caesar's reach. In Gaul itself, the tribes observed that Caesar's ambitions extended beyond their lands, reinforcing the perception of Rome as an unstoppable power. This intimidation factor was as important as any battlefield victory, shaping alliances and discouraging uprisings. These campaigns also underscored Caesar's ability to adapt tactics to different environments. The Rhine crossing demonstrated Roman engineering prowess and the strategic use of natural barriers. The First Britain expedition highlighted reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare. The Second Britain expedition combined these lessons with greater force projection, coordination, and logistical planning. Caesar's methods revealed a general who was not only a brilliant tactician but also a keen strategist, able to adjust to unfamiliar threats and environments. Economically and politically, the campaigns brought tangible benefits. Securing the eastern frontier reduced the need for constant defensive operations against Germanic incursions. The demonstration of Roman power across the Channel limited the support that rebellious Gallic tribes might receive from abroad. Furthermore, the prestige and wealth acquired through successful campaigns enhanced Caesar's standing in Rome, providing both material resources and political leverage. Soldiers gained plunder and glory, while Caesar strengthened his influence over the provinces, allies, and the Senate. By the end of 54 BCE, Caesar had solidified the eastern and northern frontiers of Gaul while extending his influence across the Channel to Britain. The combination of military skill, logistical planning, and psychological strategy made these campaigns a blueprint for future operations. They reinforced the perception of Caesar not just as a military commander, but as a statesman capable of shaping entire regions through a combination of force, diplomacy, and foresight. The Rhine and Britain campaigns also set the stage for future challenges in Gaul. Tribes in the north and west had been subdued or intimidated, but unrest persisted. The campaigns demonstrated that while Rome could reach distant lands, maintaining control required constant attention, adaptable tactics, and decisive action. Caesar's ability to integrate reconnaissance, engineering, and psychological warfare became central to his approach in subsequent years, including the uprisings that would culminate in the revolt led by Vercingetorix in 52 BCE. In sum, the 55 to 54 BCE expeditions across the Rhine and to Britain highlighted multiple aspects of Caesar's genius: engineering and logistics. Constructing a bridge over the Rhine and managing fleets across the Channel demonstrated the Romans' technical capabilities and Caesar's leadership. Adaptation to terrain. Both campaigns required adjusting tactics to forests, rivers, and seas, showing Caesar's flexibility. Psychological warfare. The presence of Roman forces in foreign lands intimidated potential enemies and discouraged uprisings. Intelligence gathering. Reconnaissance in Britain provided critical information on enemy settlements, terrain, and military capabilities. Political strategy. Success enhanced Caesar's prestige in Rome and deterred both internal and external opposition. By demonstrating that Rome could strike across rivers and seas with speed and precision, Caesar not only secured Gaul, but also expanded the perceived boundaries of Roman power. These campaigns were as much about perception as reality, showing that Rome's reach was limited only by the imagination and audacity of its generals. By the close of 54 BCE, the Rhine frontier was secured, the British tribes had been intimidated, and Roman influence over Gaul was growing steadily. Caesar's legions, disciplined and battle-hardened, were ready for the challenges that lay ahead. Revolts in the north, rebellious tribes in the west, and the eventual uprising of the united Gallic forces under Vercingetorix. The stage was set for the next phase of the conquest, where strategic brilliance, political acumen, and relentless determination would define the entire history of Caesar in Gaul. By 53 BCE, most of Gaul appeared to be under Roman control, yet the reality was far more complex. While Caesar had subdued major tribes in the east, north, and west, the loyalty of many Gallic communities was fragile. Tribal resentment, coupled with memories of Roman campaigns that had brought death, displacement, and loss of autonomy, simmered beneath the surface. The northern plains, once subdued during the Belgic campaigns, were a particularly unstable region. Among these tribes, one would soon rise to challenge Roman authority with devastating effect: the Eburones, led by the cunning and ambitious Ambiorix. Ambiorix was a chieftain of exceptional skill, known for his intelligence, charisma, and mastery of guerrilla tactics. Unlike other leaders who confronted Rome in open battle, Ambiorix understood the advantages of surprise, mobility, and psychological warfare. The Eburones were not a large tribe, but they occupied the difficult terrain of forests, marshes, and river valleys, which could serve as natural fortifications. Ambiorix seized the opportunity presented by the winter campaigns, exploiting Caesar's focus on other regions to organize resistance against the Roman garrisons stationed across the north. The initial spark came in the winter of 54 to 53 BCE. Roman legionaries, spread thinly across fortified camps, were vulnerable to sudden attacks. Ambiorix, displaying both cunning and audacity, orchestrated a surprise assault on a Roman camp, luring the soldiers into a false sense of security with promises of peace and safe passage. Then, at the height of winter, his warriors struck, annihilating a full Roman legion. The attack shocked the Roman world. It was one of the few times that Caesar's forces had been decisively defeated, highlighting the dangers inherent in occupying hostile territories, and the skill of Gallic commanders who could combine intelligence with tactical aggression. Caesar responded swiftly to the crisis. He understood that allowing the revolt to spread would embolden other tribes, potentially undoing years of conquest. Northern Gaul's terrain, filled with forests and rivers, posed logistical challenges, but Caesar's legions were disciplined, experienced, and well-trained in rapid marches, fortifications, and flexible tactics. He set out immediately to suppress the Eburones and restore Roman authority, demonstrating a hallmark of his leadership: rapid, decisive action in the face of unforeseen challenges. The Roman response combined strategy, force, and political maneuvering. Caesar did not merely seek to punish Ambiorix and his followers. He aimed to reassert Roman dominance, send a clear warning to neighboring tribes, and restore confidence among Roman allies. His campaigns involved carefully planned marches through hostile territory, construction of fortified camps to secure supply lines, and precise, coordinated attacks on villages and strongholds sympathetic to the rebellion. Every movement was calculated to strike fear and disrupt the cohesion of the insurgent tribes. Ambiorix and the Eburones used their knowledge of the terrain to delay and frustrate the Romans. Guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and hit-and-run attacks tested the discipline of Caesar's legions. The forests and marshes, once advantageous to the Eburones, became zones of constant vigilance for Roman scouts and soldiers. Yet, despite these challenges, the combination of Roman training, engineering skills, and leadership allowed Caesar to regain control. Temporary forts, watchtowers, and strategic river crossings ensured that the legions could operate effectively, even in difficult terrain. As the punitive campaign progressed, Caesar systematically targeted rebellious tribes. He combined military action with diplomacy, offering terms of surrender to some communities while punishing others through destruction and reprisal. This dual approach ensured that fear and loyalty worked in tandem. Tribes saw the consequences of defiance while recognizing the benefits of submission. The campaign emphasized the delicate balance Caesar maintained between coercion and pragmatism, showing that Roman authority relied not only on victory in battle, but also on perception, intimidation, and calculated mercy. The suppression of the Eburones and other northern tribes was brutal but effective. Ambiorix, despite his cunning and leadership, could not sustain a prolonged campaign against the disciplined, organized, and adaptable Roman legions. Caesar's forces, using superior numbers, mobility, and coordination, destroyed villages, captured or killed insurgents, and reasserted control over the region. The punitive expeditions sent a stark warning. Roman authority was absolute, and rebellion, however bold, would be met with overwhelming force. The campaign also highlighted Caesar's logistical expertise. Moving legions through the difficult northern plains required careful planning of food supplies, forage, and troop rotations. Roman engineers constructed bridges, fortifications, and roads to maintain operational momentum. Scouts and allied tribes provided intelligence, identifying enemy movements and potential ambushes. By integrating military precision with strategic infrastructure, Caesar demonstrated the holistic approach required for long-term conquest and occupation. Beyond the immediate military objectives, the suppression of northern Gaul reinforced the political stability of Roman alliances. Tribes that had remained loyal or had been previously subdued saw that Rome could protect allies and punish enemies. This dual lesson, reward loyalty and punish defiance, was central to Caesar's method of governance and conquest. It ensured that even after the legions moved on, Roman influence would remain, as fear, respect, and dependence created lasting political order. The revolt of 53 BCE also underscored the challenges inherent in governing a diverse and fragmented region like Gaul. While some tribes sought Roman favor, others were resistant, often influenced by charismatic leaders like Ambiorix, who promised autonomy or revenge. Caesar's campaigns demonstrated that military conquest alone was insufficient. Continuous presence, surveillance, and strategic action were essential to prevent uprisings from gaining momentum. The experience in northern Gaul would inform his later campaigns against larger, more coordinated coalitions, including the Great Uprising under Vercingetorix in 52 BCE. Importantly, the suppression of the Eburones illustrated the psychological dimension of Roman power. The destruction of the tribe, the decisive punishment of leaders, and the visible presence of Roman legions across northern territories created a climate of fear and submission. Tribes understood that resistance carried immense risks, and that Roman military and administrative power could reach even the most remote and difficult regions. This projection of authority was as critical as the victories themselves, ensuring long-term control without the need for continuous large-scale battles. Economically, the northern campaigns reinforced Rome's ability to extract resources, tribute, and manpower from conquered territories. Supplies, livestock, and labor were requisitioned from compliant tribes, supporting Caesar's legions and financing further campaigns. The integration of northern Gaul into the Roman system strengthened trade networks and facilitated the movement of troops and supplies in subsequent years. This economic aspect was essential. Conquest without control of resources could not sustain long-term dominance. By the end of 53 BCE, northern Gaul was once again under Roman authority, and Caesar had reasserted control over a region that had briefly defied him. The punitive campaigns eliminated immediate threats, reinforced the importance of Roman loyalty, and set the stage for the challenges that would follow in 52 BCE with the rise of Vercingetorix. Caesar's approach, swift response, combined use of force and diplomacy, and strategic integration of intelligence and logistics illustrated why he was one of history's most effective military leaders. The revolt and its suppression also highlighted a recurring theme of Caesar's campaigns: the interplay of human ambition, local politics, and military discipline. Ambiorix's courage and cunning were significant, but they were ultimately insufficient against the organization, adaptability, and strategic acumen of Caesar. The lessons learned from this rebellion about mobility, terrain, alliances, and psychology would shape the conduct of Roman campaigns for the remainder of the Gallic Wars. In conclusion, the events of 53 BCE in northern Gaul were a crucial episode in the broader history of Caesar's conquest. The revolt led by Ambiorix demonstrated both the potential for resistance among the Gallic tribes and the challenges Caesar faced in maintaining control over vast and diverse territories. The subsequent suppression reaffirmed Roman dominance, stabilized the region, and reinforced the model of governance and warfare that Caesar would continue to employ: a combination of decisive military action, strategic logistics, psychological projection, and political calculation. The northern campaigns of 53 BCE were a testament to Caesar's genius. He had turned a potential disaster, the annihilation of a Roman legion, into a demonstration of Roman power, discipline, and authority. By the end of the year, the message was clear to all of Gaul: defiance was possible but costly, and Roman control under Caesar was both resilient and adaptable. These lessons would resonate across the rest of Gaul, setting the stage for the greatest challenge yet: the unification of the Gallic tribes under Vercingetorix in 52 BCE, which would test Caesar's leadership strategy and political skill like never before. The year 52 BC marked the pinnacle of Gallic resistance against Rome. After years of campaigns across Gaul, Caesar had subdued major tribes in the east, north, and west, and had projected Roman power beyond the Rhine and into Britain. Yet, despite these victories, unrest persisted. Tribal resentment, fear of Roman taxation, and the desire to preserve autonomy remained strong. Among these tribes rose a leader of extraordinary vision and charisma, Vercingetorix, a young chieftain of the Arverni, whose name would become synonymous with Gallic defiance. Vercingetorix emerged from a noble lineage and possessed both military skill and political acumen. Unlike many tribal leaders who acted independently, he understood the strength of unity. He sought to bring together the fragmented Gallic tribes into a coordinated coalition capable of challenging Caesar's legions. By emphasizing collective defense, scorched earth tactics, and strategic retreat, he aimed to exploit the Romans' reliance on supply lines and their inability to operate indefinitely in hostile territory. The Arverni, Vercingetorix's own people, were among the most powerful tribes in central Gaul. From this base, he launched a campaign to unite the surrounding tribes. Diplomatic skill was as important as military prowess. He negotiated alliances, promised shared spoils of war, and leveraged the widespread resentment of Roman taxation and control to build a coalition that included the Remi, the Idui, some factions, the Bituriges, and other central and northern tribes. This coalition represented the most organized opposition Caesar would face in Gaul, threatening to undo years of Roman conquest. Vercingetorix employed innovative tactics designed to counter Roman strengths. One of his most effective strategies was the scorched earth policy. Rather than confronting Caesar directly in open battle initially, he ordered the burning of villages, crops, and supplies along the Roman advance. This deprived the legions of forage, strained their logistics, and forced Caesar to rely on long and vulnerable supply lines. The tactic exploited Roman vulnerabilities. Disciplined and powerful as the legions were, they could not operate effectively in a region stripped of resources, especially when facing a mobile enemy familiar with the terrain. The first major confrontation came at Gergovia, a fortified Arverni settlement situated on high ground, near the modern city of Clermont-Ferrand. The site's natural defenses were formidable. Steep hills, narrow approaches, and strong fortifications made a direct assault extremely difficult. Caesar, confident in his experience and tactical ability, attempted to assault Gergovia with his legions. However, Vercingetorix's preparation and knowledge of the terrain turned the encounter into one of Caesar's rare battlefield setbacks. The Romans faced a combination of uphill attacks, entrenched defenders, and well-coordinated counterattacks, which forced them to withdraw with significant losses. The victory at Gergovia was a psychological triumph for the Gauls. It proved that Roman legions, despite their discipline, could be checked under the right circumstances. Tribal morale surged, and the Gallic coalition grew in confidence and cohesion. Vercingetorix's reputation as a leader capable of challenging Rome spread rapidly, encouraging tribes that had previously been hesitant to join the revolt. The momentum seemed to shift in favor of the Gauls, creating a real threat to Caesar's campaign. Yet, Caesar was nothing if not adaptable. Recognizing the strength of the Gallic coalition and the challenges of open battle at Gergovia, he adopted a siege strategy for subsequent encounters. The most famous and decisive of these was the Siege of Alesia, the fortified oppidum of the Mandubii tribe, where Vercingetorix had concentrated his forces. Located on a hill and surrounded by rivers and natural barriers, Alesia was nearly impregnable by traditional assault. Caesar, however, relied on both engineering genius and strategic foresight to turn the situation in Rome's favor. Caesar's solution was extraordinary. He constructed double lines of fortifications encircling Alesia, an inner line to prevent the escape of Vercingetorix's forces, and an outer line to repel the Gallic relief army known to be approaching. The engineering feat required thousands of soldiers, vast quantities of timber, earth, and materials, and precise coordination. Roman legions built ditches, ramparts, palisades, and watchtowers, creating a siege network designed to withstand both sorties from the defenders and attacks from external forces. Vercingetorix, aware of the encirclement, attempted several sorties to break the Roman lines, but Caesar's defensive measures and the discipline of his legions thwarted each attempt. Meanwhile, a Gallic relief army, estimated by Caesar to number in the tens of thousands, approached the siege. The Romans, divided and surrounded, faced the risk of being crushed between the forces inside Alesia and those outside. Yet Caesar's careful planning, use of reserves, and understanding of terrain allowed the Romans to hold both lines. The combination of engineering, strategy, and leadership culminated in one of the most famous sieges in military history. As supplies dwindled and hope for relief faded, Vercingetorix's position became untenable. The siege demonstrated not only the military discipline of the Romans, but also the limitations of even the most well-organized tribal coalition when facing the technological, engineering, and tactical superiority of the Roman army. Recognizing the impossibility of victory and seeking to save the lives of his remaining warriors, Vercingetorix surrendered to Caesar, ending major organized resistance in Gaul. The surrender at Alesia had immediate and long-lasting consequences. Militarily, it confirmed the effectiveness of Roman discipline, engineering, and strategy against a coalition of determined but less organized enemies. Politically, it marked the collapse of the Pan-Gallic rebellion, forcing many tribes to submit to Roman authority once more. Psychologically, it established Caesar as a commander of unparalleled skill, capable of turning even seemingly impossible situations to his advantage. The aftermath of the siege also highlighted Caesar's pragmatic approach. While Vercingetorix was taken prisoner and later paraded in Caesar's triumph in Rome, surviving Gallic tribes were treated with calculated leniency. By integrating them into the Roman system, levying tribute, and demonstrating both strength and opportunity for cooperation, Caesar ensured that Gaul would remain under Roman influence for generations. The conquest was complete, yet the method of integration allowed Rome to maintain relative stability in a previously fractured region. The campaign of 52 BCE showcased multiple facets of Caesar's genius: strategic foresight, understanding when to avoid confrontation and when to employ siege tactics, engineering and logistics, constructing massive fortifications under pressure and maintaining supply lines during a prolonged siege, psychological acumen, leveraging fear, intimidation, and calculated mercy to control rebellious populations, coalition management, exploiting divisions among Gallic tribes while countering attempts at unity led by Vercingetorix, adaptability, shifting tactics in response to terrain, enemy strategy, and unexpected developments, turning setbacks into victories. The significance of Vercingetorix's uprising extends beyond military history. It represented the last major attempt by the Gauls to resist Roman domination as a united force. The revolt crystallized the potential of a unified Gallic resistance while simultaneously demonstrating the organizational, engineering, and tactical superiority of Rome. The events of 52 BCE would become a defining moment, symbolizing both the end of large-scale Gallic independence and the height of Caesar's early career. The Siege of Alesia, in particular, has endured as a classic study in military strategy. Caesar's use of double fortifications, careful allocation of forces, and anticipation of relief efforts exemplified the combination of planning, leadership, and adaptability that characterized Roman military success. The victory also underscored the importance of intelligence, reconnaissance, and rapid engineering, skills that would continue to define campaigns in subsequent years. By the end of 52 BCE, the Gallic uprising had been crushed, Vercingetorix had been captured, and Roman authority was firmly established across Gaul. The unity that Vercingetorix had achieved, though short-lived, had posed a serious challenge to Rome, demonstrating that with coordination, knowledge of terrain, and innovative tactics, the tribes of Gaul could have contested Roman expansion. Yet the disciplined organization, engineering ingenuity, and strategic vision of Caesar ensured that Rome's dominance remained unbroken. The events of 52 BCE also set the stage for the final phase of the conquest of Gaul. With major resistance neutralized, Caesar could consolidate Roman control, integrate tribes into administrative systems, and prepare for the subsequent political and military challenges that would follow, including tensions with Pompey and the eventual civil war in Rome. The campaigns demonstrated the interconnection of military prowess, political strategy, and psychological influence in achieving and sustaining conquest. Ultimately, the Great Gallic Uprising under Vercingetorix represented both the apex of Gallic resistance and the demonstration of Caesar's genius as a military commander, strategist, and political leader. It showed how a determined coalition could challenge Rome, how to reign, and tactics could shift the balance temporarily, and how discipline, foresight, and adaptability could overcome even the most formidable opposition. The events of 52 BCE were decisive in shaping the future of Gaul, Rome, and the career of one of history's most influential figures. By 51 BCE, the dust had begun to settle across Gaul. The Great Rebellion led by Vercingetorix had been crushed, northern and western tribes were subdued, and the Gallic landscape had been reshaped by 8 years of Roman campaigns. Caesar's conquest, which had started with border skirmishes against the Helvetii in 58 BCE, culminated in the dramatic siege of Alesia in 52 BC. Yet victory on the battlefield was only the beginning. The next challenge was consolidation, integrating Gaul into the Roman system, establishing administrative control, and ensuring long-term stability across a diverse and previously autonomous land. Even after the defeat of Vercingetorix, pockets of resistance remained. In Brittany, along the Atlantic coast, some seafaring tribes and smaller inland communities continued to resist Roman authority, inspired by memories of Veneti bravery or the recent uprising. In northern Gaul, remnants of the Eburones and other Belgic tribes had avoided capture, conducting sporadic raids on Roman outposts. Caesar, understanding that incomplete control invited rebellion, launched targeted campaigns to neutralize these last centers of resistance. His approach combined military action, diplomacy, and political negotiation, a formula that had proven effective throughout the Gallic Wars. The Roman legions moved methodically, employing fortifications, rapid deployments, and a presence that projected both authority and security. Commanders under Caesar were instructed to maintain discipline, prevent looting among civilians, and enforce compliance while integrating compliant tribes into the Roman administration. In some regions, Caesar allowed traditional leaders to retain local authority under Roman oversight, ensuring continuity while establishing allegiance to Rome. Where resistance persisted, punitive measures, including execution of rebel leaders and confiscation of resources, sent a clear message. This balance of coercion and pragmatism became central to the process of Romanization. The political integration of Gaul was as crucial as military victory. Roman governance relied on establishing administrative structures, collecting tribute, and ensuring loyalty among local elites. Caesar appointed governors, magistrates, and local administrators to oversee territories, often co-opting tribal leaders willing to collaborate. Taxes, known as tribute, were imposed to support the Roman army and fund infrastructure projects. Roads, bridges, and fortifications were constructed or expanded, linking previously isolated regions and facilitating both military movements and economic integration. Trade flourished under Roman supervision. Roads like the Via Agrippa connected northern and southern Gaul, enabling the movement of goods, armies, and information. Markets in cities such as Agedincum, modern Sens, and Lugdunum, modern Lyon, became hubs of commerce, attracting merchants from across Gaul and the broader Roman world. Agricultural production, previously disrupted by years of war, was revitalized, with Roman techniques improving efficiency and output. The conquest had thus not only imposed political control, but also laid the foundation for economic transformation that would benefit Rome and the local population alike. Culturally, the Romanization of Gaul began in earnest. Roman laws, customs, and social structures were introduced, blending with existing Gallic traditions. Latin became the language of administration, law, and trade, gradually replacing local dialects in official and commercial contexts. Roman architecture, including forums, temples, amphitheaters, and aqueducts, began to appear in major towns and settlements. Public baths, roads, and urban planning reflected Roman influence, providing both practical benefits and symbolic demonstrations of Roman superiority and civilization. Military presence remained a central tool for maintaining control. Caesar established permanent garrisons across key regions, ensuring a rapid response to uprisings and deterring rebellion. Soldiers acted as both enforcers of Roman authority and agents of Romanization, interacting with local populations, building infrastructure, and supporting the integration of Gaul into the empire. This dual role, combining military discipline with administrative and economic functions, reinforced Rome's long-term hold on the territory. By 50 BCE, Gaul was firmly under Roman control. The rebellion had been crushed, political structures were in place, and Roman influence permeated daily life. Caesar's conquest had transformed Gaul from a fragmented collection of independent tribes into a network of territories aligned with Roman interests, governed under Roman law, and integrated into the broader political and economic structures of the Republic. Yet this integration was not merely administrative. It was transformative, affecting language, culture, trade, and societal norms for generations. The aftermath of the conquest also had significant personal and political implications for Caesar. He had amassed enormous wealth, which allowed him to pay his troops, fund further campaigns, and secure loyalty through rewards and land grants. His military successes elevated him politically, strengthening his position in Rome and setting the stage for the confrontation with Pompey and the civil war that would ultimately reshape the Roman Republic. In essence, Gaul had become both a military triumph and a political platform, cementing Caesar's reputation as one of the most capable leaders of his time. Romanization, however, was not a process of immediate uniformity. Some regions retained Gallic customs, languages, and practices, blending them with Roman influences over decades. Local elites who collaborated with Rome often adopted Roman dress, language, and administrative practices while maintaining traditional authority over their people. Religious practices evolved, with Gallic deities sometimes merged with Roman gods, and cults incorporated into broader imperial rituals. This blending of cultures was a hallmark of Rome's approach to conquered territories. Integration rather than eradication, ensuring stability while expanding influence. Economically, the post-conquest period allowed for significant expansion. Roads and rivers facilitated trade with the rest of the Roman world, from Hispania to the Italian heartland. Markets flourished, artisans prospered, and agricultural production increased with Roman techniques such as irrigation, crop rotation, and animal husbandry. The integration of Gaul into the Roman economy also meant that resources from the region, grain, timber, metals, and slaves, could support Roman military and civic projects, further strengthening the Republic's infrastructure and economy. The strategic importance of Gaul extended beyond immediate conquest. With Gaul secure, Rome had a buffer against Germanic tribes to the east and a platform for future operations, including eventual campaigns in Britain and beyond. Control of the Rhone and Seine river valleys, along with key ports on the Atlantic, allowed Rome to project power efficiently, both for defense and for trade. The conquest transformed Gaul into a cornerstone of Roman expansion in Western Europe. Socially, the conquest and Romanization reshaped local hierarchies. Tribal leaders who had submitted to Caesar often received Roman titles and privileges, enhancing their prestige while ensuring loyalty. Populations were sometimes resettled, especially in regions devastated by warfare, allowing for better management and easier administration. Military veterans were granted land, fostering loyalty and creating settlements that acted as centers of Roman culture and influence. This process ensured that Roman authority was embedded not only in governance and law, but also in daily life, land ownership, and social structures. By the end of 50 BCE, Gaul had been transformed into a Romanized region with secure borders, integrated administration, and a population increasingly familiar with Roman customs and laws. The campaigns had enriched Rome, extended its influence, and provided Caesar with both the political leverage and the military resources necessary for the turbulent years to come. Gaul's incorporation into the Roman sphere was a milestone in the expansion of the Republic, demonstrating the combination of military force, strategic planning, and cultural integration that made Roman conquest enduring. In summary, the aftermath and Romanization of Gaul represented the culmination of 8 years of campaign. From the initial confrontation with the Helvetii in 58 BCE to the suppression of Vercingetorix in 52 BCE, and finally to the pacification and integration of remaining tribes, By 50 BC, Caesar had transformed a fragmented tribal region into a stable Romanized territory. This transformation required not only military brilliance, but also political foresight, logistical skill, and cultural understanding. The conquest of Gaul was thus both a military achievement and a transformative process. It secured Roman dominance, reshaped societies, and created a foundation for centuries of Roman influence in Western Europe. Caesar's campaigns demonstrated how a single leader, with strategic vision and relentless discipline, could change the course of history. By 50 BCE, Gaul had been fully integrated into the Roman system, establishing the stage for Rome's continued expansion and Caesar's future political ambitions, which would ultimately reshape the Roman Republic itself.